Welcome to Global Beehive Talk, and today we had the honor of having Göran Lindsjö with us, senior IA expert located in the US. Thank you for joining the Global Beehive Talk.
Thank you, Hans. Appreciate to be here.
It's fantastic to have you here and talking about AI, which is something that is really of interest of many people now, especially digital professionals. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where your background?
Oh, my background, I'm been an AI serial entrepreneur for many years, and then I also worked 10 years in the Swedish central government, and I moved to USA 5 years ago. I'm working here in North America, working in Europe as an AI advisor, as you said. I also have quite a lot of lectures, quite a lot of keynote speech and so on.
Thank you so much. It must have been very exciting to follow the evolution of AI for so many years. How did it start? What sparked the interest in AI?
Oh, that was really long ago, before most of your listeners were born, I suppose. I started in a small company in Sweden in the mid 80s actually, and I really enjoyed what we were doing then. After that, there have been a lot of so-called AI winters, but as you know, AI has now been extremely important the last 5, 7, 10 years maybe. So it's very exciting, yes.
Yes, definitely. If we go back a little bit to the Swedish situation here, there's the OECD report saying that Sweden is lagging behind when it comes to digital governance, government. What is your view on that? Is that true? What is the reason why Sweden is a little bit falling behind, do you think?
Well, traditionally Sweden has done very well in that type of reports. I think both private sector, but also the public sector. But at the same time, I think the report you're talking about from OECD, they have a very important type of criteria, very relevant type of criteria. As I remember, for example, digital by design and data-driven and user-driven and a few others. And I actually think Swedish government organizations should try to study that type of criteria, both on national level, but also on local level. So I think there's a lot of things to learn from other countries really in that respect. And it's also, for me, working with AI, this is an important foundation for many AI application. But you said, you asked about USA. I'm not sure that most of the government organizations in USA are that interesting to study from a Swedish perspective. It's maybe more like Denmark, Canada, UK, South Korea would be more interesting. But at the same time, there are a lot of really good things to study in USA, of course. For example, the leading healthcare organizations, where we can learn a lot, really.
You mentioned earlier before this interview that many of these initiatives are actually dependent on the people, the leaders that are actually driving digitalization, and it's quite uneven ambitions in that sense. Is that something that you agree with, or that how would you view that?
Yeah, I think that's true in every type of organization and in every country, really. If you make a root cause analysis of why a specific organization is doing very well, I find normally there are few people, actually more than the organization as such, that made that happen. So yes, that's what I learned from many places. Yes.
But is that also that there is a lack of momentum in the organization itself, that there are many barriers for adopting to new digital technology?
Yeah, there is, and it's important to try to find the barriers and to try to get rid of the barriers. But I think that is actually not the only thing you need to do. You need to focus on the way forward as well, not only the barriers. You need to focus on what you can do, how you can improve things.
Excellent. As you mentioned before, that you are an advisor when it comes to artificial intelligence. How do you think AI plays a role in digital governments today?
I think it's an important transforming power. I think in many countries, in governments for many countries, it's really important to use AI. And the OECD report you mentioned, I don't think that's the only reason actually Sweden is lagging in also in AI. I think it's a lot of other things, like it's regarded as a technology rather than a transforming force in Sweden. So I think we need to recognize AI to more for being able to deliver better service to citizens, for example, higher quality. Things should be easier to access, faster, more relevant, more personalized, and so on.
I really appreciate your comment there about seeing AI as a tool, that many see AI as a tool rather than transforming power. How can we overcome that? Is that a mindset issue?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really important that leaders in any organization understand that those possibilities to change things, rather than as you said, rather than a technology tool or whatever, rather than something for the IT department, for example. It's much more a thing for the executives in any organizations, no matter if it's public or private, or which country we are talking about.
Excellent. The evolution of AI is going very, very rapidly at the moment, but how do you see that AI will be used in the future? For example, in the next 5 years or 10 years, both in public and private sector. What do you think is how will we view this in 10 years time?
Well, the way I look at that type of question for the moment is, rather than we have more supply than demand actually for AI. So the maybe for me the most exciting thing is not the development of AI. Maybe surprising to hear, but I'm actually more for the moment more interested to see how will different organization use what's really out there. How do both companies and government organization use what's already out there? So for the moment, the leaders, the organizations and countries and regions which are leading, they are actually investing most in AI, and the followers are investing the least in AI. So the gap is widening all the time. So I think the big test now is not for AI, but rather for as a technology, but rather for leadership. I think that's the big test. But of course, regarding your question, of course, AI will also develop a lot. It will be better self-explanations, and we will need less data, for example. So that there will be more more applications which we really can't do today, which will be possible to do.
Mm. You said there is something about that there be a great divide between those who are actually implementing AI and those who will be without. Is there a big threat to that? There be countries and regions that will be much more advanced in that sense than others?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I think it's so important, not only for business leaders, but also for politicians, for example, to understand how this, what's happening in the society when you're implementing AI. What we see here in USA, for example, is a big disruption in several sectors due to AI. For example, the retail business, which happened actually before the pandemic. And there are other sectors as well. And I think you need to understand that thing, the consequences.
Mm. Yeah, but I also saw, I don't know if it was an article I read, but that the future of AI is more or less concentrated to US and China, which has the muscles to develop it and machine learning. Is there an ethical problem with that, that they are too dominant when it comes to this kind of technology?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of problems regarding that, ethical problems, but other problems as well. So I think actually EU needs to step up a lot, not only regarding what I think EU is very good at already, ethics and similar important aspects, but also actually stepping up using AI, because a lot of things you don't learn until you really start using it. You don't see the consequences. You don't get a good debate in society regarding AI until you start seeing it being used.
Mm. You are also a world-renowned speaker and keynote speaker. What would be your recommendation? What do you say to digital leaders or professionals when it comes to digital technology and AI? What kind of advice do you give them?
Well, I think I mentioned a few of these already. That is to understand the potential and the consequences of AI. If you're in private sector, to understand that there are new competitors, new business models, how AI affects the workforce, how AI affects lifelong learning, for example. And I also think it's important to understand the magnitude of what's happening in different sectors, as I mentioned. That there is really a disruptive force. So if you think that things are changing only marginally, you may misunderstand what's happening. And I also think it's, as a leader, it's important to understand that it's not really enough to start like testing AI as such, or start with some supporting processes. Yeah, I think you need to start within your core business really, and explore new business models, for example. So and have quite, yeah, really the same type of demands on your AI projects as an end projects. It needs to deliver like any project.
Yeah, definitely. Because in essence, what I understand from you is that the AI product is a business project. It's not the technology process or technology program as such, but rather the business project. Is that also the recommendations you made? Would that be also be valid for a municipality or a Swedish department or agency to look at it in that way, or do they have challenges they need to address first?
Yeah, of course, a lot of things are different regarding what you mentioned now compared to the private sector, but there are also a lot of similarities, and one actually is for the management to understand the possibilities and consequences. So I think that will be that is really the same for government institutions as for the private sector.
Thank you for those closing remarks. I really appreciate this talk, and my key takeaway here was actually that the AI should be seen as a business product, not a technology product, and also that it also requires a little bit change in mindset and leadership to have the right focus. I thank you so much for participating in the Global Beehive Talk, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Hans. Have a good evening.
Thank you.